My stepdad hid a camera in my room and I found it. Now I don't know how to tell my mom. I never imagined I'd find myself in a situation like this. It all started about 3 weeks ago. I'm 17 and my room is my sanctuary, a place where I can escape the pressures of school and life. That day had been particularly rough and I was desperate to get home and unwind. When I walked through the front door, I was greeted by the usual noise of family life, my younger brother's laughter, the hum of the washing machine, and the clinking of dishes. My stepdad had been living with us for just over a year. My mom was absolutely smitten with him, but the adjustment had been difficult for me. There were always these little things that felt off, and despite my best efforts to be respectful, I couldn't shake the sense that something was not quite right. I went to my room, closed the door behind me, and began to change out of my school clothes. As I was reaching for a sweater on the top shelf of my closet, something glinted in the corner of my eye. It was a small black box, partially hidden behind a stack of old textbooks. My curiosity was piqued, and I pulled it out. As soon as I saw the tiny lens peeking out from one side, my heart dropped. It was a hidden camera. I felt a rush of panic and revulsion. My mind raced with questions. Why was there a camera in my room? How long had it been there? What was my stepdad planning to do with it? The thought of someone invading my private space, especially someone I was supposed to trust, was deeply unsettling. I carefully examined the camera, hoping against hope that it wasn't functional. I pressed a few buttons, but it seemed to be off. Still, the very presence of the camera was a violation of my privacy. I decided to check if there was any recorded footage, but the camera didn't seem to have any easily accessible files or an obvious way to view them. I was left with an overwhelming sense of dread and uncertainty. I knew I had to decide what to do next. Confronting my stepdad directly seemed too risky without more evidence, but telling my mom seemed like it would lead to a major confrontation. I needed to weigh my options carefully. I decided to observe my stepdad's behavior over the next few days to see if I could gather more information. Over the next day, I started paying closer attention to my stepdad. I noticed that he was lingering around the house more than usual, often stopping outside my room and casting glances inside. His behavior was subtle but unsettling. He seemed to be overly concerned about the state of the house and asked more questions about my daily routine. I tried to keep my observations to myself while I continued to process what I had discovered. It was a daily battle between trying to maintain normalcy and dealing with the creeping anxiety that came with the knowledge of the hidden camera. I felt like I was living in a constant state of vigilance. After a few days of observing, I realized I could no longer keep this to myself. The situation was too serious and the potential implications too troubling. I decided it was time to talk to my mom. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, knowing it would likely cause a rift between us and create an enormous amount of stress. One evening, when the house was quiet, I took a deep breath and approached my mom. She was sitting in the living room reading a book. I could tell she was tired and I felt a pang of guilt for what I was about to do. I sat down beside her, my heart pounding, and took out the camera. I showed it to her, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained how I found it and my growing concerns about what it meant. Mom's reaction was immediate and intense. Her face went pale as she processed the sight of the camera. I could see the shock and confusion in her eyes, followed quickly by anger. She asked me questions, and I told her everything I knew, from the way my stepdad had been acting to my own feelings of discomfort. Mom took the camera and, with a stern expression, said she needed to speak with my stepdad. I watched as she walked towards the door to his study. The waiting was excruciating, and I found it difficult to sit still. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. What if this drove a wedge between them? What if it made things worse? When Mom returned, her face was a mix of anger and frustration. She told me that my stepdad had admitted to hiding the camera. According to him, he had done it under the guise of ensuring home security, but Mom didn't buy the excuse. She was furious and deeply hurt. She had insisted that the camera be removed immediately and made it clear that such an invasion of privacy would not be tolerated. Despite the relief that came with the camera being removed, the situation left a complex and lasting impact on our family dynamics. The trust between my stepdad and me was irrevocably damaged, and the tension in the house was palpable. My mom and I had long conversations about boundaries, trust, and how to navigate this new reality.